Yo, what's up, folks? Welcome to the chat, to the call today. Would love to take a minute to kind of let people come in from sessions. So let us know where you're from in the comments. Would love to see where you guys are coming in from, and we'll dive into it in a second.
What's
Let
going
us
on? I had
know.
to I had to look at the right bar to be like, all right, we got a lot of people joining.
We do.
A lot of people
We're
joining.
coming.
Love to hear if there's any international people. Anybody from the Balkans, you know, my, my side of Eastern Europe. See if
We
you're
got a lot of West Coast,
at Austria,
Montreal.
we got Italy. That's what's up. I
Oh
love
yeah.
Ontario, Florida, Frisco. I'm in Frisco. Well, I'm in Allen, Texas right now, believe it or
Oh
not.
yeah. Sweet.
New York,
Come by. Hell yeah.
Michigan, Greece, awesome. Cali, Princeton, Texas, British Columbia. I love the diversity. Wisconsin. I love the diversity right now.
I know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, last
Brooklyn. Let's go
interaction we did.
Knicks.
Yeah,
Let's go
dude.
Knicks,
Let's go
baby.
Knicks. It's a big win.
India.
They're a bridge partner. All right. So that was nice. So are the Canes. So we're
Knicks
looking
on
good right
bridge.
now. Yeah.
Oh man, listen. Hey, I guess I need to do a post to take advantage of this marketing. You know what I
I
mean?
know, right? I know we're gonna have one going up today. Pretty pumped about it. Sweet folks. Well, we'll dive right into it. Luca, I'm sure a lot of these people are very familiar with you, but would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, and actually, within my slides, I'll spend just a little bit of time going over my experience to kind of create a little bit of a perspective and frame on the program design and where I'm coming from and where my kind of templates and my systems come from. But I'm the owner of Vigor Ground Fitness and Performance. I've been coaching for 21 plus years now. Had a gym for 20. Actually, we started a gym in Slovenia 20 plus years ago. It's kind of the gym for coaching in Ljubljana. My brother, two of my best friends that continue to run it, came to Seattle 19-ish years ago, and I've had gym there for October will be 18. I still coach. I love coaching. I absolutely, I don't need to, but I love coaching. So I'm still on the floor. NFL off season, probably about 20 hours. Non-NFL off season, usually like 14-ish. Because like to me, coaching is a craft. It's the master skill. It's what like, especially with the age of AI happening and stuff. I believe that, these are the things that if you're excellent at, your stock value goes up. It will continue to. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about this. And yeah, I think I got a stat there, but I've wrote like 20 plus thousand programs, in my lifetime, and I still write them a lot. I choose to, I got a team that does a lot of stuff. I still choose to write for small group, for my athletes, because it's part of the craft. And it keeps me sharp, it keeps me getting better, and then I continue to share. So that's what I'm going to do with you guys today. I'm pretty much giving you like a bunch of, I mean, the system goes even deeper, but you can steal a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you. And like my experience is, I mean, I've coached Cy Young Award winners, Super Bowl champions, the last Super Bowl champions. I have a number of players that I still actively coach from the Seahawks, um, to full-blown teams, high school basketball teams, MLR teams. I was as a private sector strength coach for the Seattle Seawolves for multiple years, in every walk of life you can imagine. So elite athletes, executives, kids, I mean, you name it. But I only say this to say, that I've done so much of this stuff. That's what's molded the program design that you're going to see, right? Like I would say, in the trenches person, a practitioner that's teaching, not a person that's teaching without practicing, which I'll die on that hill. We could dive deep into that. I'll see the UK, Wagwan. I know all about that. So let's rock and roll into the actual presentation. You're absolutely right, Shauna. It was a tough loss for the Seawolves in the semis. Love those guys. So we're gonna go, actually, let me go back into my slides to start from slide one before I get you guys rocking and rolling. Also, just know that I'm at certain points in time, I'm probably going to do like if you've ever sped up your podcast to like 1.5 speed, I'm gonna be doing that sometimes, even 2x, and sometimes I'm gonna slow it down. But today is about the program design system, how to write, build effective training programs for your clients. And I'm going to come from a perspective of like if you're, many of you are individuals, meaning like kind of solo coaches, solopreneurs. Matter of fact, I might not even see this, but for everybody here, would you drop in the comments for Cooper to see
Yep.
if you are a kind of solo coach, if you have a team, if you own a gym, if you're online or in person, just let me know. I would love to see, where you guys are coming from because this will be very helpful for everybody. But it will really be helpful if you're, again, if you have anybody that you end up teaching, even if not now, but in the future, right? So again, this is just like I could give you a trillion pictures of the different people I've trained from, again, Cy Young Award winners to Super Bowl champs to celebrities to, I would say, influencers, all that good stuff. But really, the main thing is it's like a very wide range. In my 21 years, a very, very wide range of people that I've coached and still coached every day. And by the way, I love it all. I don't have like this whole thing about, I get a lot of, folks, they'll be like, I really want to train pro athletes. I'm like, man, there's nothing to me more fulfilling than seeing a client improve, get stronger, draw body weight, improve performance, like the goals that they want. And I don't care who they are. So, to me, that's a big fire kind of inside of me. It's not just like the known people. It's everybody. And 21 years later, I never get tired of people going like, wow, man, like, you've helped me with fill in the blank. I love it. It lights me up every time. I built 10,000 plus training programs my 21-year coaching career, at least, right? At least. And for the last 17 years, so I'm talking about 21,000, 4 week training programs essentially. And whoops, let me go back here real quick. I'm just trying to get these videos out of my face. Um, and I've had coaches as part of my team. I have to teach and create a system for getting results for all our clients. So that's a big part of it, right? When you've done it for a really long time, you want to streamline things and you want to be able to build programs faster, but not give up the quality of the programs. And it's like, what if you have to bring, I would say that your business is only as good as your team that delivers these programs, right? Meaning that like you have to replicate yourself to be able to do it. You have to replicate your own reliable programs, and then you have to replicate it for your team so that they can deliver this. Okay, so this is a very, very important factor of it. Now, I've talked about this. You might see some slides before if you've been on a previous, I would say, presentation of mine. But my model of like the athlete for life, I look at each client and I'm like, look, uh, there's 9 major physiological adaptations, right? You got speed, power, hypertrophy, muscular endurance, anaerobic capacity, max aerobic capacity, long duration steady state. You got strength, you got technique. You never get a client that comes in and goes like, I just want this one thing. I don't care about anything else. Usually it's like, hey, I want to lose some weight. I want to get stronger. My cardio sucks, but like I'm tight. So I want to improve my mobility, right? Like, and when we go here, guess what? Athletic abilities, skill, speed, power, strength, endurance, flexibility, mobility, agility, coordination. And I put these up to basically say, like, look, you have to understand how to piece these things together because the truth is, people look for how they want to feel, who they want to become, and not just one physical attribute, right? Like, hey, I want to do a powerlifting meet. I just want to get strong as hell. I don't care about anything else. No, like none of our clients do that, right? Our clients want to be able to do stuff, right? And that can be, look, play basketball, go sprinting. Pickleball is huge right now. Lifting, go for hikes. High rocks is massive. And, I'm sure all of your clients have a mix of the things that they want to do, right?
Can I interrupt real quick, Luka?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've got folks kind of coming from tactical, college, high school, strength and conditioning, and then lots of private facilities, mostly solopreneurs as well. Is there any more context you feel like you can kind of give, knowing that
That's
that's the
that's
case?
that's very helpful. Okay, that's helpful. And because the thing about it is that like each one of you, and again, those are pretty different. You think about high school athletics, you talk about gym pop, private sector, you talk about, tactical. There's going to be a 10,000-foot principle that's going to overview all of these. By the way, tell me let's say we take a high school basketball player. Do they need to be strong? Do they need to be fast? Do they need to be conditioned? Right? Like we're going to go through these 9 physiological parts and say, hey, if I had a 0 to 10 on each one of them, you'd say, build your player, right? What do they need to have? They're gonna have to have a bunch of different stuff. In a tactical world, actually in Vegas when I spoke, and I think we put this up on the Bridge site, that presentation, there was a whole section on the tactical side of things. Like what the tests are, what we're looking for. But it was the same thing, right? The word hybrid really means you want multiple adaptations, right?
Yep.
And so it goes, and again, for our clients, the same thing. I mean, I have trained personally in some way, group format, semi-private, one-on-one teams, over 4,000 people in my coaching career. And I've not ever once had a person that didn't need a whole number of these things to be improved. Right now, sometimes, look, I just had some NFL guys that are extremely strong, right? We just need to maintain that. But guess what? Rate of force development sucked. Mobility sucked, right? Like their alactic conditioning wasn't great. Right there, I got three buckets I need to improve while maintaining other buckets, right? So this is what I mean, that this is just the reality of the world. This is why it's so important for, I love it. Everybody that's here that's coaching people in person, you're my people. Like this is my people, man, because you guys know if you've ever heard, and I'm going to go off on tangents, which I'm glad that Cooper brought these things up, right? I call it top down, bottom up. So top down is when somebody tells you like, hey, the research study of this 8-week study shows you blah 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 blah, right? And then here's what's probably the most effective for hypertrophy. Okay. Bottom up is what we have to filter through as the real world. So my example would be, by the way, I did a presentation for Fort Lewis military, the strength and conditioning team, and they were telling me that they get these boxes with, and I was teaching them a small group strength system that I created, and they were like, "Well, Luca, we get these boxes and we don't know what's in them, so we actually don't know exactly which tools we'll have and how much of them to do the strength session." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Well, let's break this down." Okay, we get three trap bars, and the heaviest trap bar, it can only be 315. And you're talking about your strength and power block. Like, how do you do that? And we went over it, right? Because we talked about, hey, if I accelerate something, the force is higher, right? Force equals mass times acceleration. And we broke it down. That's bottom up. Like, I could tell you, like, well, the best thing would be for you to have all the plates and all the stuff, but we don't. Bottom up is the real world. It's like the small gym that has one rack and one trap bar, right? And then some expert goes like, "Well, buy three more trap bars and another two squat racks." Like, I don't have the money, right now. So I have to make do with what I have to get the results based on, the science, the evidence, and obviously my own experiences. So that's what bottom up is. And a lot of you here may not have a lot of resources. I started in America with like a 900 square foot garage gym. I mean, I spent 7 grand on equipment, some of the stuff I already had, and I had great results. But I had to, Dave Epstein has an incredible book that just came out. It says Inside the Box, and he talks about constraints, right? Like the thing that made me an incredible coach, one of the things was constraints. I didn't have the stuff. I didn't have the tech. I didn't have the force place. I didn't have all these cool $1 million facilities or multi-$100,000 facility. I had very little, and I had to make things work. And that is bottoms up. And a lot of you here, maybe it's not a lot of budgeting for your high school athletics program. Tactical, it's like, hey, you might be out in the field. You might not have a lot, to work with. But the thing is, what I will talk about is systems, and not necessarily, we'll talk about exercises and stuff like that, but it's more about systems and how to develop these multiple abilities and how to progress these things. So, again, apologize for going off on tangents, but I really don't, because hopefully that's helpful. Don't feel bad about it, because I see this all the time where coaches will feel bad because look, I speak around the world a lot, and like I've been on panels where somebody, is like, well, what I would do, it's optimal, Luca, is this. I said, oh, could you tell me how you did that with a group of 12 people? And they're like, well, I didn't. Like, just this is what the research shows. I'm like, no, how did you do it? And they're like, well, I didn't. I'm like, okay, so you're not living in the real world. I want examples of the real world. And that's what I try to share, because we all live in a real world, work with real people, and we have to deal with the constraints that we have. Okay. At the end of the day, we all want for a client's GPS. Where are they and what do they want to do? Where do they want to be? Like, you are in point A, you want to get to point B, period. That's our goal. Right. And I'll stay here very shortly, because this is kind of like the 6 steps to designing programs for me. You determine the template, especially once you have a lot of things going on, right? First, you determine the template, client goal, preferred training schedule, training history, outside gym lifestyle, right? Then you write the methods, high CNS on the right days, which day, are they off? Where do they do conditioning? Where is there a mix? Then you exercise select, right? Select the exercises that fit the methods, the client, and also the preferences, especially in the private sector. You guys will really understand this, right? And not even in the private sector, man. When I get I had a now retired Hall of Famer that comes in, and we have a program, and I'm like, hey, listen, we're gonna do safety bar, banded back squats. Like, man, I'm not gonna do that. What I do? This guy makes tens of millions of dollars and is like, been in the league for 14 years. I'm like, okay, no problem. Let's you ever try the pendulum squat? No, I haven't. You cool with trying it? Yep, cool. Oh man, this feels great. Great. We'll do the pendulum squat. Preferences, right? Like, or you're gonna be like, well, actually the safety bar is the best. Like that guy's not coming back ever again, right? So, and that goes for private sector or professional sector, all those different things. You have to take preferences into play. Then we go to sets, reps, tempo, rest intervals, etc. And then obviously the feedback loop. How are they feeling? Soreness, recovery, compliance. Let me tell you something. Your program may be the shit on paper, okay? But if the person's not compliant on it, you have to start checking yourself. Is there too many exercises? Are they too hard? Are they sore all the time? And there's a lot of coaching stuff there too, expectations, so on and so forth, right? And then you have feedback and assessment. You have the feedback and assessment drive the course correction, right? So we take, like, by the way, how, like, I think some of the things that really matter is having a good intake form, right? Like, we have this is a type form intake form. I just have a snapshot of it. If you guys want it, I can send it to you. Because when we find stuff out, right? Like, are they hurt? Are they injured? What did they do before? What do they like? What they don't like, right? You just have that ahead of time when you're starting to build out the program. And like, this is our first session. Now, listen. I will tell you something about I've done, I think, 110 certifications. Okay. And I'm not exaggerating that number, right? Like FRC, FRA, DNS. I mean, you just name it. Like, I've done it, right? And me personally, I would do these crazy in-depth assessments. I could see things. I could go like, oh, let's put you on the table. Let's do the scour test. Let's do that. Or let's do this. And once I built a team, that's not feasible. Now, like, I coach my team a lot, but we needed to come up with some standards and some simplicity of how to have a strategy session, first assessment, first workout that would lead us to building a program that makes sense. Okay, so we simplified. And by the way, this is a lot of iterations, right? What will happen is that a client will come in, they'll take an in-body scan if they want to. Like, if they're like, I don't want to do it, no problem, right? But that gives us body fat percentage, weight, I would say lean mass density, all those good things. 10 to 15 minutes, we build rapport. And by the way, at this point in time, this person has been sold. We have a salesperson, right? But you might not, and that's okay. But either way, you're going to spend about 15 minutes building rapport. And if you have an intake form, you already know a lot, right? But you're like, hey, tell me a little bit more about why you decided to reach out to us. What have you been struggling with? Like, how does that feel? Like, you want to basically unravel like what point eight is for them. What, like, in 6 months, if this were to be the greatest dream transformation for you, where would you be? Tell me about it. Like, what do you feel like? What do you look like? What's your performance like? Again, by the way, if this is a body transformation, health client, performance, it doesn't matter. Either way, there's a point A and a point B, and they're walking you through it. Okay. After that, we do a dynamic warm up. It's going to be around 10, it could be 10, 12, 15 minutes. But through that warm up, we are assessing because we're going to do things like the overhead flexion test against the wall. We're going to do a thoracic windmill to see their windmill, right? We're going to do basically ankle dorsiflexion stuff. We're going to do a squat to stand, and we'll make adjustments on the way, right? We're going to do 90-90 static lunge, right? We're going to do a straight hamstring leg. So we're doing basically exercises that are showing us where they have limitations, right? Again, squat to stand with the overhead squat coming up. It's part of the warm up, but I'm taking notes, going like, okay, cool. I see where there's a restriction. Why? Because in the dynamic warm ups and obviously in the exercises, I'm now going to choose based on where they have restrictions. Now, obviously, a dynamic warm up only tells us so much. Then we go through a workout, right? So the assessment becomes a workout. Here's our base, and I'll explain how this goes up and down, right? Kettlebell goblet squat, kettlebell deadlift, push up, TRX row, split squat, like a 90-90 split squat. And then we'll do the plank. And basically, our plank is kind of like one of the few things that I've carried on and continued from the FMS is that, like, where we do the different plank positions of where their hands are. But what am I seeing from here, right? Like, I do a goblet squat. Like, look, if I've got somebody that's come in and they're like, hey, I've been training for the last 4 years. They told me you guys are great. Like, what I'm going to do is they're probably not going to do a goblet squat. Maybe they'll do it as part of warm up, but then they'll go, hey, can you do a back squat? Like, yeah, I'm great with a back squat. We might assess a back squat or a safety bar squat, or right. Now, again, me understanding them is going to allow me to modify those exercises. But let me be clear. 80 to 90% of the time it's this because we get as many kind of, I would say, high level people that we train. Majority of the people that we train are general population that want to get stronger, fitter, leaner, improve their performance, right? And then, by the way, even on the push up, trust me, like I've had like, NFL Pro Bowlers that like can't do 10 push-ups once I coach them up on it. And they're like, what the fuck? So but this gives us a really, really good, for example, kettlebell deadlift will a lot of times turn into trap bar deadlift if they have a certain level of strength, right? And we're actually going to do a couple of sets of this stuff, right? So we're doing a goblet squat. We're usually going to, I would say, superset it with a TRX row. We're going to do a deadlift and superset with a push up, right? Or we're going to do split squat and superset it with a plank, okay? And that gives us, again, my coaches are trained to be able to go like, let me see this and kind of veer off of that. But this is the baseline, okay? Because that's from there we start building programming, right? And I hope you understand like this has worked extremely well because when I get a new coach in, they can be drilled up to do this well right from the get-go. And that's what, and I hate the word, is overused, scalability, right? But like to me, it's the standard. How can I have coaches do things that are really good standard? And because if I go like, hey, new coach, let me teach you everything I know about FRC and FRA and DNS, and we're going to do the breathing drills and like, infrasternal angles, like their brains melted,
Yeah.
And again, like most people, I would probably assume, if somebody's an elite level coach, it's much harder to hire. Like we get really good people with good communication skills that love fitness that have a certain level of understanding, by the way, right? But we develop them. So I want those people to be able to come in and get results with clients. And so this is important. By the way, I'll answer questions at the end if you have them. Just drop them in for Cooper about stuff like this, because if there's any context and nuances, we can rock and roll. But
I
my
got one before you move on,
Yep.
Luca, is, when you do have lots of different populations kind of coming in to you, like I guess when you go back to almost like the several, components that we can train up, like how do you sort of over time make sure that you've assessed all those? Because obviously we'd be there for 12 hours, right? If we were trying to do everything in
Yep.
one session. So can you talk a little bit more about how the assessment process unfolds over time so you do have insight on all that?
So a couple of things. I mean, look, I would say developing the coach's eye and building up your team like that. Everything I'm going to show you, like we do a lot of in-staffs. We do it I think we do more continuing education externally than any gym in the country, very likely. Like
Mhm.
this year, we'll have 10, 11 seminar certifications for our team externally. That's not in-staffs. That's not me teach. Like that's just, we just had barbell rehab. We had Dr. Justin Farnsworth. We have, super coach seminar. I mean, we just have stuff all the time,
Yeah.
right? So the coach's eye, you know, by the way, when we're doing dynamic warm-ups, we're doing skipping drills, or we're doing like, you're already like, okay, this person doesn't have great coordination, this person doesn't have really good power, so on and so forth. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is like, if you get a client that says like, hey, and when you get to the programming part, you'll see what I'm talking about because it doesn't matter who it is. We're gonna do power stuff. We're gonna do plyos. And we're gonna regress and progress it. But what we're implementing now is quarterly at the gym. It's not mandatory. This is the other thing too, right? Like when you have gym pop, you can't be like, hey, I need you to come to this thing to do Hawkins Dynamics force plate testing. Like what? No.
Right.
But we get like, but we have a testing day that's like long. Actually, we have High Def, our physical therapy clinic that's inside our gym. And together we'll do a 3 hours where we do a broad jump. We'll do force plates, which gives us like RSI and like vertical jump. If people want to do it, meaning if like some people I won't allow to do it yet, but like flying tens, okay. Then you have a trap bar deadlift 3 RM. That's your max strength. We'll do push-ups in 2 minutes. We'll do a half of your body weight goblet squat for max reps. So both of those are lower and upper body strength endurance. And then we do a modified 6 minutes Cooper test mostly on the Echo bike, just because we know
Mhm.
everybody can do it, right? And that gives us a bunch of data. So we encourage people to do that because it's a nice wide, you got power broad jump, you got your vertical and we have repeated jumps that gives us kind of elasticity. The flying tends to speed if you're doing it. Trap bar deadlift is like relative strength I mean, it's for lower body. And the thing is, we didn't want to extrapolate it too much because now you're just doing too many tests. But it means that like once a quarter, a person can come in and then see where they are on standards. I also think it's really good for your gym to have some type of standards, which I can kind of drop in what we use, basic stuff. And and your basic, because the thing is, think about this. I like if I'm working one-on-one with an NFL guy, there's no problem. Like, hey, come in and we're going to do these tests, right? In a semi-private training model with, I have 7 coaches right now, right? Like it is just not doable. But this is one of the ways that we can do it is that we can test for things that they want to improve and we want them to improve, and then we can show them what they're doing. Output monitors is another one that's really easy. We put it on the bar, and like we'll do like because within a training session, I can do that test. I don't have to change the training session. I can do the test
Yep.
and go like, hey, here's where you are right now. Your rate of force development like is not great. Like your strength speed that we want to improve is not that great. But hey, we're gonna now do the program and we're gonna test it in 4 weeks. So there's the individuality of it, and then there's the group testing that I just mentioned that I think is really valuable for you to plug in. You could do it as little as twice a year. I think once a quarter is really good. I think that optionality is good because what will happen is that people that are just starting their fitness journey, all of this will be overwhelming if you do it. Like if they, so they're going to probably opt out. But as they get fitter, they're going to go like, you know what? That the third quarter, now that I've been here for like 9 months, I want to do that. I want to test that out, right? Because again, for Jenny, that's trying to get stronger, lose body fat, to go like, hey, Jenny, now we're going to test all your stuff. It's like, whoa, 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 right? And
Yeah.
these are the nuances that I'm glad you asked because they're the nuances that I share with my team that, somebody that's new coming on board, they'll be like, but Luka, but what about, and these are stuff, things I have to answer. And then we role play and we make sure everybody's comfortable with it. And by the way, great questions, guys. Like these are the types of things that, if you drop in there, I'll answer all of them as we go throughout this thing. By the way, after that, like my big thoughts are like, movement quality is king. I'm not going to do anything that doesn't look like good, right? And good has a range, right? It's not like I have a very, very, very high standard for reps, but I'm also not like a stickler to where like, oh my God, not perfection. Stop the, that's bullshit, right? And so the reason why is ideally we're going to find a pattern you can load immediately, right? Find ways to challenge them. People don't like feeling like they're in rehab. That's what they go to PT for, okay? A lot of times, right? So, by the way, what does that mean? That might mean that a beginner that's like, I want to get stronger, and they have some limitation. We might put them on a pendulum squat and have them push it, okay? Because it's like they're going to be able to go deep into that rep range. They're going to be able to control it. They got some extra stability, right? And when people are like, "Oh my God, machines," that might be the best choice for them. Okay, just want to let you know that like that's how we look at stuff. It was why I've started getting a lot more machine. I got pendulum squats, belt squats, hack squats, all that good stuff. Um, Before you load a pattern, make sure you do it well first. Okay. I mean, yes, I know this is common sense and basics, but like we drill the hell out of this to my team. So the two things I'm thinking about, what movements do they have access to and what adaptations am I trying to create? Right. Because once we get to the rep ranges a little bit later on, we'll talk about, hey, like if I'm building muscle versus strength, my RIR is gonna be a little bit different, right? Like how many reps I leave in a tank is gonna be a little bit different. So that's what I'm thinking about. Now, here's this is majority of like this is our templates. Okay. If you come to our gym and you are training 1 time a week, it's always going to be full body. Now, here, our model is, without going into the business side too much, is, we have semi-private personal training, which is about up to 4 to 5 people, a completely customized program to you. Small group personal training is groups up to 15, generalized template that we adapt to you, right? And then team training is like our general fitness conditioning. It's more cardio based. And like everything I'm going to show you is more for private, semi-private training, right? If they come in 1 time a week, they're going to be full body. If they come 2 times a week, it's going to be A, B, like 2 different programs, full body. If they come, by the way, 3 times a week, this is where I've found a lot of success. By the way, they'll do 2 different days. So it'd be ABA. Next week will be BAB, ABA, BAB, right? Because newbies, by the way, this is what we'll do for newbies because guess what happens if you practice a movement or a skill more frequently? You get better at the skill, right? So all of a sudden, if we're doing the goblet squat twice a week, they get way better. They get better results. They move better. Their progression goes up. They're happy about that. Now, if they're a little bit more experienced, we'll go ABC full body. Do we, others will do is like lower upper full. We'll do push pull legs. This kind of is more reserved for people that have been with me for many, many, many years coaching, and we switch stuff up. So 90% of our programming lives here, right? And that's what I'm going to show you guys. Okay. Because again, you're gonna find like in your what you do, the majority is gonna fall within like training 2 to 3 times a week with me. It's this way. So, and you want to build templates for that, right? And then when we look at laying out the training week, this is what I teach my team. It's like, okay, look, ideally, if they train with us twice a week, it's gonna be like Monday, Thursday. We need enough gap between there. This is I'm pretty sure it's from Joel or Mike Robinson, but right, like the way we categorize stuff is red is your hardest training day, intensity and volume, right? Closer to failure if it's from muscle hypertrophy, it's like heavier loads above 85, 90%. Okay, your green is your medium, and then your blue is your kind of recovery days, right? So, by the way, I've had to coach a lot of people up on this, but ideally you're doing 2 days a week, Monday, Thursday. Yeah, it could be Monday, Wednesday as well. But then how do you do the other days? Lower intensity, whether that's like a recovery workout with zone two, tempo intervals, whatever, some mobility. If they do 3 times a week, by the way, most of the 3 times a week, we're kind of like right here, right? Red, green, red. By the way, this is how I train right now, consistently, right? I got a 1 year old, like I got 4 businesses, shit's hard. This is what does really well for me. But the thing is, this is here's why I'm bringing this up, because showing your team these things and like teaching them how things should look like, that creates a system, right? You got the Charlie Francis classic high-low model. This is an example. Honestly, this is what I do with my NFL guys, performance off season, right? If they're doing 4 days a week, upper body focus, lateral acceleration, lower body focus, linear change of direction, conditioning, recovery, upper body, right? You linear, and you got lower body, lateral change of direction, right? So it's kind of like you can see that wave. But this is just important because when we build like you won't have to worry too much. You're gonna have to worry more about this with general population. When it comes to athletes, you might have to look like in this direction. But again, you have to have a system. I have to be able to go to my coach and say, hey, when you built this program on the days that you did, why did you do it? Right? And they'll go through the filter of that. You just have some examples there, right? Like, but at the end of the day, you got to do optimal with what they can do consistently. Like we've had nurses that essentially, they can train twice a week, and they would be like, I can do Monday, Tuesday. That's what they could do. So guess what we did? You know, it's like they would have a little bit more time off the weekend. So Monday would be the hardest day, and Tuesday would be like a medium-ish, right? And then we'd go like, hey, can you get 2 blues in even though all those days that you're working? We'd adjust it, right? So you do have to think about that part. Even though it's not optimal, it's like, hey, what can they do consistently? This is the bottom up thing that I was talking about again, where somebody goes like, well, Luka, it would be better if she did these days. I'm like, I understand that she cannot. So what's the best option for what she can do, right? And then we adapt and adjust it, okay? Because it's not how hard you can train, it's what you can recover from that really matters. And a big part of this is teaching our clients this stuff. I show these charts to my clients all the time. I got them on my phone. I'm like, all right, let me show you. Because if you're always in the red, because we have folks that are A-type, they're like, I went and did this Metcon at home, and like, okay, like, tell me more about it. I was dead, I was like, okay, but we just did a really hard session yesterday, and then you did that Metcon, and you see how you're always redlining, and then you're wondering like why you're achy and pain, you're hitting the wall, and why your weights are lower this week. We got to educate not just our team, but our clients. Okay, now, this is the thing that I talk about a lot, where it's like psychology meets physiology. Okay. So this is just an example. This is like notebook LM, right? That flip the body around because they do that. It does that sometimes. It looks a little wacky. But you got to think about training age, right? Did they have, we get quite a lot of people because we get referrals from PT a lot. People that have rehabbed their low back and then come train with us. Okay. Now, first of all, there's a physiology and a psychology to this. Even if their low back is fine now, I like 16 years ago, I had an incredibly bad back injury. And so I understand this very, very well, right? When you've had we're talking about femoral nerve entrapment, my leg is completely numb, doesn't work, I atrophy within 2 weeks, like bad, I can't walk, right? And that person, and you go like, hey, we're going to do deadlifts, they might be fine, but psychologically, they're like, fuck no, right? And if you're like, no, 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 you'll be fine, right? Like you're now like fighting them. But what if you gave them a sandbag, said like, look, we're gonna do this sandbag good morning. And it's like, let me show you how to do it. We're gonna go really light. They do it, and they do it light. They do it heavier, heavier, heavier. Loads in the front, gets their rib cage down, right? Pushes air in the back. They're like, wow, where are you feeling that? My butt and my hamstrings. That feels good. Great. Now, listen, we might now have that be their hinge progression for the next 4 weeks. Could they load a heavier? Sure, but I need to get them to believe that they can do things pain-free way. And maybe we'll go from there to RDL top down, right? Suitcase, on the side, less stress on the back, and we kind of progress it. Maybe we go to a hip thrust. Again, no axial loading, right? So it's going to feel better because they can do that. We have to take psychology into account. It's the craziest thing that I've seen when I go to conferences, when I go to places and events, when people are like, we do this. I'm like, have you dealt with like majority? Remember, about 80% of people every year are going to be in back pain at some point in time, right? So this is just an example, but you have to have a model for that. And when we get to templates, I'll kind of show you how you can flip-flop that, right? Skill level. What if they're like, hey, I've been barbell snatching since I was 12 years old. Could I put that as a, speed, strength, speed exercise in there? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to do it for people that have never done it, right? Okay, mobility, limited thoracic rotations, preferences. They love kettlebells. What if somebody comes in and tells you, Luka, I fucking love kettlebells, and you put no kettlebells in their program? Like, I'm sorry, that's a dumb move. And you could be like, well, it doesn't matter. Listen, they're gonna be like, oh man, I told them I love kettlebells. Like 3 to 5 exercises are kettlebell exercises. They're listening to me. That person's gonna stay longer, right? They hate cardio. And then you got to find like what do you hate about cardio? Oh my God, just the boring being 30 minutes on the echo bike. Cool. And then guess what? You give them aerobic circuits. We do a shit ton of this, right? Keep them short. 3 minutes on the Jacob's ladder, 8 minutes on echo bike, but it's tempo intervals, right? If you guys know Joe Jameson's tempo intervals. Then we go multi-directional sled work. Then we do a med ball circuit at low intensity, right? And they're like, oh my God, this is cool. I'm like, this is cardio, right? Like, but again, psychology has to meet physiology if you want to make the best programs. Don't get stuck in just like, this is how we do it, okay? I'm going to flip through this real quick because I've talked about R7 program design. I got this from Mike Robertson, right? Release, reset, readiness. That's your range of motion activation movement. So every program has to have this, okay? Just how much of it has depends on the client. So your reactive stuff is what I just call speed, power, athleticism. Resistance is strength plus resistance training. Resilience, conditioning, cool down. And like this is what I gave my team, right? Ramp, core. Now here's the thing about core. What we've started doing a lot is if somebody has a weak core and if they're like, I want to work on my core, at the end of the warm-ups, we add some core work. Couple reasons, because we're like, well, whatever you're the freshest at, you're going to be able to improve, right? That skill. Is this really going to affect the rest of the training session? No. By the way, it doesn't mean it's in there. Okay, this is kind of like a caveat, right? If somebody wants to really work on core and or if we're like, man, this is really bad, yeah, we're going to plug it in there. Then we go to power and athleticism, then strength, then resistance training. By the way, if you're going and saying what's the difference between strength and resistance training, well, strength training is like the main goal is to get you stronger. Resistance training might have other attributes like I want to put on muscle. Maybe I want to work on tendon, right? Stiffness. Maybe I want to, there's like strength endurance. It could be a bunch of other things that we work on in the resistance training phase. Metabolic training is your conditioning, and then usually it's recovery. We tell people what to do for recovery. We have a kind of little protocol before they leave. But this is easy for my team to understand. Like they know this, but it's like this is how you talk to clients as well, right? All right, so then here's the need. Do you need all of these? So this is by the way, you can steal this. Not sure where I got this from back in the day, but we still use it. Matter of fact, not only ahead of time, if you go to my YouTube channel and say step-by-step template to build dynamic warm-ups, look, like I literally run through this. I give examples. It's like a video. This is what we use for training our team, right? It's an onboarding, so you can steal that. But you need all of those? Not necessarily, but you need a template to model your team can work with, make it easier for programs, right? So again, soft tissue work, right? 4 different things. So let's say they have a full body workout and it's like, hey, we're going to roll out quads, uh, TFL, we're going to get glutes, we're going to get lats, maybe one other thing, right? What are the main things that are going to be tight for these folks that they can roll out? Breathing resets, maybe one. I don't do more than one. I love like positional stretches, couch stretch, whatever it may be, thoracic spine, ankle mobility. And then we go to squat. This might be a squat to stand. This might be a hip airplane, right? This might be a lunge with overhead reach, open up the side. It might be a combo movement, like Spider-Man lunge with hammy stretch. And then we go to locomotion, right? So high knees, A skip. Might be a march if it's an older, person that's not as proficient here. Neuroactivation might be pogo jumps, band assisted. Like there's a bunch of different stuff that we can do. But this is the model. Now, this ramp for us is usually 10 to 12 minutes, not 15 to 20. Okay. Um, but here's the biggest thing. It's more like have this for your team so they can plug and play. And again, please go to this. This is an unlocked video. Anybody can watch. I basically take you through that and show an actual example of this, right? Because what you want to do is you want your team to make great programs. You want to make great programs with a framework that's fast, but fast doesn't mean bad because this is what you're filtering through your experience and wisdom of programming. Now, this is another example of like, um, for example, for people that are, this is like general fitness, fat loss kind of population. So a lot of people that we get in, and you'll see this in the beginner programs, right? Month one, 3 sets, 8, two sets of 15, 3 of 12, 5 of 5, 4 of 6, 3 of 10, 3 of 8, two. Then it kind of repeats itself, right? This undulating month to month. Now, this has worked really well for that beginner client. And I'll still show you in a template how we're still doing athleticism stuff, right? And then how this looks like in an actual program. Okay. Now, when it goes to strength set rep methods, this is like when we go to intermediate. And by the way, I'll show you this in actual programming, right? You have different, by the way, this does not mean I actually have a chart with even more of these methods, and my team can pick and choose. And they basically pick and choose based on, the client. Like we do a lot of this. 6-4-2, 5-3-1, which is like Jim Wendler stuff. We'll do like 7-5-3. 3 of 3 is a big one for beginners. 5 of 2, working up to, it's actually not a 3 rep max, but it's like working up to 3 RM above 90%. 5 of 5, 1-3 ratchet loading, 5-4-3-2-1. I love this one. Like I got a couple clients doing this where they work up to a heavy single and it's not their max, but like it's almost their 5 has like 3 to 4 RIR, like reps in the tank, right? Then 4, they keep increasing intensity. So really the last 2 to 3 sets are pretty intense, but this is great for building strength.
Is this that like ascending load theory stuff where it's like, hey, you start, at 5, obviously, with like whatever RIR you said, you get heavier each set, but you also kind of accumulate fatigue as you get there. So it kind of truly gives you like a single that's not quite a max, but might feel like a max, because of that fatigue. Like dive into that a little more.
Okay, so honestly, the main part of this, and I'll use myself as an example, right?
Yep.
If you have some lifting experience in the belt, but like it takes, like for example, when I do a 10-minute dynamic warm up now, I don't even sweat. I have a good work capacity, but
Yep.
it takes me, you'll hear people go like, it takes me a while to get going. Like 15 years ago, I could have a dynamic warm up, some ramp up sets, and then I could fucking go, right? But now, like, I need more sets for my nervous system to be like fully, like I'll say it in non-geeky terms, right? But like
Mhm.
activated, meaning like I feel like that my output from my nervous system is at peak in a
Yep.
training session, right? So when I do this, like let's say that I could do on a really good day, I don't know, 460 for 5, right?
Mhm.
I might go like 415 for 5.
Mhm.
Okay. But I'm going to keep going heavier. And once I get to 3, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling better. My 2 and my 1 will be my best. Then it'll be closer to my actual full output. I might finish this at like 95, 97% of my 1 RM.
Mhm.
And so that's a great strategy. Now, what you said, also a part of it, but what I've used it for is that people that take a little bit to feel like they're warmed up, even though they did ramp up sets.
Totally.
And it's like if you've worked with folks over 35, that have had some nagging stuff, like you'll understand. You'll be like, fuck yeah, like when I do this, this feels great. And you don't, your 5 is not like you're close to your 5 RM, or even, it's actually it's basically part of the ramp up sets. Like I'm gonna do
Yeah.
ramp ups to here, and I'm gonna do, this is gonna be a ramp up set to my 3-2-1 essentially, right? Um, and by the way, when I'm doing like we will do in staffs where I'm taking a coach through this and we're talking into it. Like there, I'm like, all right, cool. We warmed up, great. Let's go. Let's load it up. What's your usual 5? Because they know it. Like, all right. So then people see what we're doing in real life, right? So this is important because, but my main thing that I wanted to share with you guys is like, do you have this for your team? Because when you see it in a program, you'll be like, they don't have to question these things. We know they work. Why? Because I have 4,000 plus client examples, right? Now, this one is a little bit more like you do have to have some nuance, like what you pick, right? It's kind of like, hey, Jenny's been training with us for 2 years. we're gonna get her stronger, but right off the bat, we're gonna do, I don't know, some 1-6 Polican contrast loading. Probably not. You know what I mean? 6-4-2 waves, perfectly fine, by the way. You know what I mean? Like if you know how to do it with that client. And so same thing for muscle building. Like we love 5 of 5, 3 of 12, 4 of 6, 7 5 3 max is awesome. 3 of 8 cluster sets are honestly a cluster sets come up here too in the strength one. 6 4, 6 12, 25. Very, very aggressive here. So you want to decide who you want to pick that with. 3 8 contrast loading, 10 8 6 15. But we could, by the way, we could do like a 3 day, talk about all this stuff. And I'd love to talk about it. But my point is like this is the plug and play stuff. Okay.
Yep.
So it cuts down on your programming time, just like the conditioning methods. This is, I've been very fortunate. Joe James is one of my closest friends. We live close by. We've, trained every Sunday together for 12 years. I've done his cert so many times through that I can teach it. And it's like, we use this. What's level one, for conditioning methods? Cardiac output, tempo intervals, tempo lifting. Level two is high resistant intervals, high intensity continuous training, alactic intervals, explosive repeats, aerobic plyometrics, strongman training. Level three is extensive intervals, threshold training, cardiac power. And kind of like, look, there's more equipment than that. But the point is, my team knows that if somebody's training twice a week, semi-private, they're usually not going to do the hard training methods on those other days. They're going to pick, some level twos, maybe even level three for some people, depending on those days that they're strength training at the end, right? So we might do some explosive repeats, alactic intervals, high resistance intervals. And but then on the other days, it's like they'll do cardiac output, tempo, HICT, whatever it may be that kind of fits those. When you guys saw those like red, green, blue, right? Well, blue is going to be here, right? On the recovery models. But the green might be like matching the green strength training day because they're with us. And it's like, well, what's realistic? Hard conditioning, people never want to do it by themselves. I got a whole like video coming up on this because this is one of the truest things of all time. If you here do really hard conditioning by yourself, put in the comments. I'll give you a thumbs up. You're rare. I'm just letting you know that, right? I created a conditioning group on Saturdays with a bunch of guys that come in and we just like, do the one hard training session together because none of those guys are doing it by themselves. I prefer to do it with other people. And you just know that's the truth. And your client, you're like, hey, tomorrow you're going to do threshold training by yourself. Yeah, fuck no, they're not going to do that.
I
They're going to,
certainly think the competitive environment, you get more out of it.
oh, one
Right.
point. But the thing is, and sometimes it's not even like they're bad people. They're making it work. It's more that like
Yeah.
they don't even know what that intensity might be.
Yeah.
So you can be by the bike and like, hey, I need you to get, up to 95 RPM. And they're like, holy shit, holy. It's like, that's where I want you to be, right? That's
Yeah.
coaching, right? You can coach
Yeah.
conditioning. We do dynamic effort, dynamic energy control. Like for example, when we're teaching people zone two stuff and they have their, Morpheus heart rate monitors on, and we're basically going like, all right, I need you to take your heart rate up to 150. And, teaching people how to do that. So a lot of times they'll overshoot. They push really hard and now all of a sudden they're 165. No, bring it down to 150. Control your breath. Okay, now you're at 150. Bring it down to 130. That's called dynamic energy control, right? It's very valuable to teach people this. By the way, do you think that your coaching looks better? Are they getting more value from you as a coach than just going like, oh, go on a bike and just do this thing, right? Or like go as hard as you can. Or no, like we're teaching people about energy systems, right?
Mhm.
So this is important, right? But by the way, this is templates, right? This is templates. Now,
Yep.
this is what it looks like in a program, in a Google Doc, right? You got your foam roller stuff. You got your resets. By the way, like this is a old. I've had this in a presentation for a while, so this is really 1 to 2. Like we don't ever do. Actually, I take this back. This is one of my like 2 years ago NFL guys who needed to have a lot of resets. Okay, most Gen Pop, most of our programs, you're gonna have like one of these, maybe two. This specific person, let's just say 9 years in the league, a lot like very beat up, a lot of resets. So just individual, right? Then you got your readiness, which is your dynamic warm-ups. Then here we've got our reactive. So this is our athleticism. Then we go into our strength stuff. This person had contrast. I love for my athlete for life program, our intermediate stuff. We contrast a lot of stuff, and I can talk about this. And then you can see conditioning at the end and then cool down, right? So that's what it looks like in a program broken down through those categories that I showed earlier, right? So if I flip back here, right, this and this, you see it here, okay? Now, obviously you're going to collect feedback loops to make adjustments. This part I haven't really shown and taught. I will fly through it fast, but I do think that it's important, guys, okay? Because addressing progressions within the program. By the way, these slides is what I've taught my team. It's what I taught Supercoach, okay? So for everybody to understand, just key programming variables, repetitions, volume, sets, volume, loading is intensity. Then you have tempo, rest periods, exercise selection, which is kind of like the most, what's the most individualized. That, by the way, that's a programming variable, right? And this is what I tell them, okay, just basics. What is intensity, right? Intensity of load is expressed as a percentage of one rep max, the most weight one can lift on a given exercise one time. This is traditional exercise physiology definition. Intensity of effort, because a lot of times when people say intensity, if you say that to a client, they're going to think this one, okay? Intensiveness. How hard is it relatively? My God, that was a hard set, right? How hard is it relative to the number of reps performed, expressed in terms of RPE or RIR, reps in reserve, which is what we use most with our clientele, right? Again, it's good to understand. Like for my coaches, I need like sometimes I get folks in that like intensity, they just think this. I'm like, no, we got to say intensity of load or intensity of effort in a set. Okay, basics, percentage of 1 RM. 1 RM is 100%, 2 RM is 95. I make sure that our coaches have like these charts because they're very, very helpful. And I'll show you too, like you can go online and find these calculators because people need to understand the intensity of load and repetition relationships. To be honest with you, you can be a much, much better coach really dialing this stuff in. It's part of what I love. One of the many things I love about the BridgeAthletic app is because it's very like basically the software helps you out with this tremendously.
Mhm.
Okay. But like look, when we look at metrics of intensity, I tell this to my team all the time. Look, we're more, yes, you can look at RPE, we use RIR a lot. If we're trying safety is the hypertrophy training zone, is like we want to get at least within 3 reps of reserve, right? Because 0 is maximum effort. We don't want to live there too much, especially with Gen Pop. Um, and I'll kind of give you my system of for folks, right? Because if somebody is a more beginner, we're going to take a longer runway. They People that haven't done much stuff, they can get adaptation with very little. To be honest with you, they can be, they could be quite far away from their 0 reps in reserve and still get adaptation, which is cool, right? But the more that they train, obviously, the more we got to pay attention to it. So we got to think like how hard is hard enough? This is a question often asked. Should you do train to failure in every set? These are questions and problems to solve. And this is asked quite often by my team. So I'm like, hey, defining the red line, there is volitional failure, which by the way, untrained clients will do a lot. The point to which one feels they cannot complete another full movement repetition. It's a mental limit. And part of the goal of coaches, in those first phases is to teach people where that failure actually is, right?
Mhm.
Because most people will quit, like, you're like, hey, I want you to do 10 rep max, right? They finish at 10, and then, the next set, you're like, all right, we call this a plus set. I'll actually talk about it a little bit later. And we're going to do a plus set. I'm going to push you. I'm going to be right here with you, and then they get 18. So obviously 10 was nowhere close. They were 8 reps away from what they thought failure was. That's volitional failure. Volitional failure also happens a ton with metabolic stress stuff. Like, if I go and say, hey, do 100 heavy banded hip thrusts, and the burn is so bad, you quit. But the thing is, if you kept going, like it's not like you couldn't keep going. Gun to your head, you could keep going. Your true 1 rep max, gun to your head, you're still not going to lift it, right? Like, so that's the difference, right? Volitional failure. This is usually metabolic stress and hypertrophy at times. Momentary failure is the point where, despite maximal effort, the load physically cannot be moved without form deviation. This is important without form deviation, okay? It's a physical limit. And I do think that like you need to get very good at determining, like we do a lot of this stuff to go like, hey, that's acceptable, form's a little off, but it's safe. Versus like, and by the way, we'll use the deadlift as this one. I'm sure everybody here knows this. You've seen a trillion videos. You've probably seen it in real life. I terminate the set. I start seeing somebody doing a centipede. You know, you know what the centipede is? You Jefferson curl out of that for that max, and you're like, I got it. You did not get it, right? So, that's usually going to be a strength and hypertrophy failure. And then what's technical failure? I still believe to me, it's like if you have good enough form and you truly can't, like, technical failure is that, right? Like, you cannot do another rep without form being off, like unacceptable to me, right? And again, high standards on that, right?
And I use like I say like it's a 10 to 20% form of deviation is probably where we're gonna call it, right? For those folks. Like now that being said though, like I do feel like there's a skill to lifting, right? And kind of
Absolutely.
the difference between like an elite level power lifter and your mom and pop coming in is that that elite level power lifter can grind with that form.
Oh
But how are
yeah.
you guys thinking about it in your facility?
I mean, look, we really do bucket people
Yep.
into, and like the beginner bucket is a long bucket. You know, what I
Yeah.
mean by that is like that's 2 years, right? And I'll always listen, rule number one, thou shalt do no harm, right? So I will always lean towards that because you're not, especially with somebody that's only been training for, and I say only for two, within 2 years,
Yeah.
you're not getting so much more from pushing it a little bit more.
Hmm.
But you could, if that person tweaks something, like now they're out, maybe now they don't feel as safe training with you. It's just a big no-no, right? So to me, and by the way, I didn't always think this way. Like the younger Luca is like, I'm getting the best results out of anybody. Fuck it. It's like, and I've really kind of, I would say, calmed down more on that because I think this word, just remember, write it down, longer runway. Okay.
Yep.
Um, now, listen, I think it's important to get people results fast because they get motivated. So you might be going like, how are you saying both of those things at the same time? Well, the great thing about beginners is that they make great progress fast. And if you're a good coach, you can show them that they're progressing really well fast. But, again, I'm not going to go like, maybe we push it for a couple more reps when things are starting to look wonky. Now,
Yeah.
if it's me and I got a coach there and I do a shitty rep, it's like, hey, 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 I need you to pull that weight down when you're doing a dumbbell press. I'm going to be able to reset, right? I'm going to be able to go, okay, cool, focus, and get a dialed in rep, even if I did a shitty one. With somebody that's doesn't have a lot of as much skill and fatigue has kicked in, it's much more unlikely. So you veer more on the safe side and you're like, that's it, that's fine, you're done. End of set. Okay.
Yep.
And then you can coach them up in between and you can give them some cues. And maybe the next set they actually do better, but you just don't play with that. Right. So that's my thought process around that. And it's done well for us because, look, by the way, nobody, if you've been coaching for as long as I've been coaching as many people, like we've had some tweaks and some injuries, but it's such a low amount, that
Mhm.
and by the way, when we've had one, like we have a team meeting and we talk about it and we're like, hey, maybe we're taking this stuff out of group programming. Maybe we kind of analyze it, right? Like we're like, hey, what went wrong? Can we make it better next time? We've just had such a small, amount of injuries. And every time there's been one, I'm devastated. You know what I mean? Even if it was like something that maybe we couldn't affect at all, I take it to heart and I look at like what can we do better inside of programming. This all
Mhm.
determines systems, right? So, again, choosing the right weight for hypertrophy. The key is that it needs to be hard enough to cause adaptations, but not so hard that you can't make progress or that excessively fatigues you. And we'll talk about jumps because this is a big one, by the way. Like I've seen a lot of folks just somebody is successful and then they load the weight and the client might finish on a set that's unsuccessful. They failed, their form broke, and it's like, all right, great, let's go to the next thing. And they're felt with they're basically left with a bad taste in their mouth and they feel unsuccessful. And like I said, physiology and psychology, we got to address this, right? We got to make sure that clients finish on wins. When novices are left to their own devices, they'll tend to select, it'll be one or the other, right? Too easy or too hard. By the way, too easy is okay with a completely untrained individual because the stress is novel and it takes very little to cause adaptations.
Mhm.
Right? Eventually, the stress needs to be increased. By the way, I count this 8 to 12 weeks is that phase for us where it's like, even if they're not close to like you know, 3 reps, 4 reps RIR, it'll be fine. Like we're teaching them to find those top sets, and you don't want to do that in the first 30 days. To me, it's like quality of movement, challenge. By the way, anything's going to be challenging for them than if they haven't been exercising much.
Totally.
So a lot more leeway. That's another mistake I've seen people make too quickly, getting people to those really hard sets. And for some folks, they might not tell you this, but they're going to be like, this is too hard. I don't feel safe. But again, they won't say it. They just won't come back. Right. or
Hmm.
they're cancer or something like that. So important, factor. Um, this is another one when I tell my team, like if you do, what is RPE 11? It's if you do 10 reps and you go for 11 and miss it. By the way, neurologically that whoops your ass, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying it like this again. We don't do this with any beginners, but here and there we will do it with intermediates. Okay, here and there. But again, it's very strategically, right? That's -1 RIR, by the way, if we look at the chart.
Do you ever think that like a Gen Pop individual moves beyond the intermediate stage? Or do you kind of always keep him there? Because I've heard a lot of mixed bag on that.
I'll tell you when we would categorize them into advanced. Okay. All right. Look, great example. If this is a example of somebody that was a client of ours for 12 years, became an intern, became a coach, very successful coach, and she's now my manager. And she just did a physique bodybuilding show, first one ever, and got 6 medals and one novice. Like,
Beast.
um, advanced. Okay. Somebody like, for example, somebody that used to not while they were with us used to do CrossFit competitions, train with us, very well trained, and now going pretty hardcore into high rocks, advanced. Those are the types of categories. By the way, some people that play not professionally, but actually pickleball players that are doing tournaments, pretty high level, advanced, right? Like some folks that do hobby powerlifting competitions, but are pretty damn serious about it, have like 10 plus years of training age. And I also take into account, this is one of those nuances where they're very into this stuff. Like they're
Hmm.
not just, they're into the training, they're into the nutrition, they're into the recovery. I'll bucket them there. Where they dedicate a lot of time, energy, and attention to it. I would bucket them into advanced. But again, it's not a lot of people. It's not a lot
Yeah.
of people. I will call intermediate plus.
Hmm.
Intermediate plus to me is like folks that like have trained for a long time and have trained with me or us for a long time. They like to push it. They're into it, but they're still like busy professionals, families, kids. They
Yeah.
don't take as much depth. Like actually, like they outsource the thinking to us a lot of times. If that makes sense, right? They're
Sure.
like, hey, I'm really good at what I do. I know you guys are the shit. Like I follow what you say. I'm into this, but I don't want to think a ton about it outside of here, right? But again, but they've achieved levels like I got a client, Travis Isaacs. He's like CMO of this, Cisco, and like busy family, just deadlifted trap bar deadlifted 500, strong dude, like,
Yeah.
but like savage though, like just intermediate plus. I can like some of the stuff that you guys saw there in like the, strength training where we do like 1-6 clusters and stuff. Like he's like, fuck yeah, and we have a lot of those people, by the way. And that will usually be folks that have trained with you for a long time, and they feel special when you give them a little bit more spicy stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Which but I think is very important. Like, by the way, those clients for us are the highest paying clients. Um,
Always, right? Yeah. They're because they're into
Always.
it. Yeah.
They're
They
into it.
fucking love
They're,
this
they're
shit.
showing up, usually 3 days a week. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And consistent as hell, even though they have very, very busy lives. Um, by the way, this is obviously a long time ago. I learned this in person from Jim, before he even wrote the 531 book. But how do you know if it's hard enough? You use a plus set. If anybody's ever done, 531, 6'2" Jim Wendler stuff, there's the +1. Yeah, what ends up happening is, you take a conservative weight, right? And you say one or more. We do that a lot, or five or more, right? So the last set is five. Like even if we're doing like a gem pop and they're kind of been with us for about again like 3 months and they've done some training, we'll go like, hey, we're gonna do on that second set, we're gonna do 8 or more, right? And that's where I'm going to push them a little bit. And maybe they get 13. And it's like, hey, you're 5 reps away from your, technical failure. Uh,
Yep.
so we're going to now, next time around, we're going to bump this a little bit, right?
Mhm.
We're going to bump your weight. And that's why I use a lot of micro plates on the dumbbells and stuff, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. Plus sets are great. Plus sets are great to find out where people actually are. And you can still terminate the set. Like, they get wobbly on the dumbbell bench press. They're going to go for another one. You're like, no, terminate the set, right? Maybe they had one more, but you're like, that's fine. But there's still like, 4 or 5 reps more than what you had programmed for them. and you're like, okay, we now know that you're right now we can bump you up. Like, and you'll make very good progress because we can go up 2.5 pounds on these presses and you'll be closer, probably be 2 RIR on that. And I'm happy with that. Right.
Mm,
Um, by the way, this is from Bridge, but it's like, what weight do you start with and what weight do you use next session? I think it's very valuable when you plug that in for people into the app. Uh,
mhm,
and again, now there's calculations that you can do in there. It's amazing. But this for coaching makes you stand out. I just want to let you know. Like the app, the programming, the little bumps, it makes you stand out. Like ramp up sets where you go like, hey, I'm gonna have you start here, which you're probably gonna be about, 5 RIR, and I'm gonna go up 2.5 pounds. You're probably gonna be like 2 to 3 RIR, and then that last set, you're only gonna be about 1 to 2 RIR. But like I'm putting your weights in so the people don't have to think about it. But you know it because you coach them, right?
mhm,
So again, I think this is a very, very big kind of standout of your coaching. There's so many things here that when somebody coaches with you or somebody else, you're gonna go like, whoa, my coach does all these little things, and like that's why they're pro expert level. That's why I'm there, right? Again, this is kind of what I said. Like, how do you consider load selection? Well, what's the planned duration of the training phase or mesocycle? What type of set rep parameter protocols are being utilized, and what's the progression plan? If it's strength versus muscle, but it's going to be different. How frequently will the identical set and rep parameters be performed? What's the training phase goal? What's the relative training experience of the individual? Like, and this is where I say, hey, for the first 2, 3 months of a beginner, like if somebody that either hasn't trained for a really long time or hasn't trained at all, where this isn't really relevant. Motor skill development is the most important part here, right? But then we go into like, at the end of month 2, we're like, you know what, we're gonna do plus sets to figure out where this person's at, and we're gonna start getting into the RIR stuff, right? By the way, use this, right? By the way, you can find all this stuff online. Like literally, if you go like rep range percentage charts, like it'll pop up for you. But why is this beneficial? And by the way, it's not completely crisp to the T, right? But if my one rep max is 150 pounds, you can see like what's 95% of that, which is my 2RM. Well, it's 142.5. Because if you're going, by the way, why would I use this? If I'm going in and undulating reps and I'm going into the next phase, I can determine about where they should be, right? Without sometimes, this will get you there faster. It's also very useful, by the way, charts. If I do 10 reps with 105, my max is 150. Why do I like this, by the way? Let's say we did but like we're not doing, especially with beginners, we're not doing a lot of like 1, 2, 3, rep ranges stuff. But but as they're improving their 8, they're improving their 12. I can go like, hey, your estimated one rep max is this. Hey, we went up on this. Your estimated one rep max on this now is this. How good is that? Like where the person goes like, wow, like I'm improving my maxes. And you can, again, this is great for showing clients. It's also great for you calculating what are you going to use for the weight for different rep ranges, right? If you go undulating from 8 to 15 in the next program, good, I can have like a decent starting point here, right? Now it's important. Some examples are too easy or too hard. Calibrating the Goldilocks gap, right? If anybody heard of Goldilocks, it's like just the right amount of weight, right? If you go too easy, they're just doing junk volume, right? Once they went through that first 3 month beginner phase. So let's say they ended, 12 reps with a 12 reps with a kettlebell that's 97 pounds, and then they started their next phase at 85. That's that's junk volume, right? Like it's too light of even stimulate anything like that, right? Too hard is like the end of the phase on, 98 pounds for 10 reps, and they just start the next phase at 115. Too
yeah,
much, too big of a jump, regardless if it's like a 6 or 8 or anything like that, right? That's why, hey, use plus sets or rep max history. By the way, you know where you get that inside of the Bridge Athletic app, where you can see all this stuff. And so now, if you've had somebody for years, you know how cool it is to be able to like see where they started, see your previous month, be able to calculate this, plug it into the next month. It cuts down your work so much, right? Because you want to go a little bit like, even if I started the next phase and the next phase was like 8 reps, okay, which I'd go heavier, heavier on, I'd probably start like at 97, right? And then build up, or maybe a 105, 102, whatever it may be, right? Like you start a little behind and you build it up beyond, even though the rep ranges are lower. Okay. So our progression, this is how I tell my team. First, patterning first. I want it to look good. If it doesn't look right, it doesn't fly right, right? Focus on movement quality. Then we go to progressive tension overload, which is external loader reps. Then, and we're not going to discuss this a lot today, but progressive movement training. This is where you layer complexity, difficulty of movement, planes of motion, load position, body position, implementing stability and speed. Can progress load, but it's secondary. And if you've ever heard of internal load, right? We increase internal load. Um, this is, I mean, I could talk about so much of this stuff. We'll probably do future stuff, webinars and with Bridge to talk a lot because people go like, when do you do stuff like that? Is everything about just improving load? And it's like, no, it's not. Do we want to move better? Do we want to move in multi-directional ways with load? Do we want to improve, again, can we decelerate loads into a hip? Like there's a lot of stuff that makes us better at movement and loading and athleticism and being a better human, right? Because again, I said at the beginning, it's not just about strength and hypertrophy. It's a lot of different things, right? But that's how we look at it. Okay. And then I give this little like everybody on the team has like this little kind of cutout, right? A summary like coach's menu, variable, load. We regress it by making it lighter. We progress it by making it heavier. We could do it with tempos, with pauses, right? Base of support. Wider base is a regression. Narrow base is usually a progression of intensity and demand. Points of contact, 4 or 3 or 2. So for example, right? Like if I was doing a row with 3 points of contact versus two, there's going to be a stability component there, right? Same thing with like if I'm doing a single leg RDL, but I'm gripping onto a rig, higher stability. Okay. I let go of the rig, more stability. If I want to improve stability, I might want to do that and progress it, right?
Mm.
So again, here, external stability, remove support, center of mass, offset. Offset is going to load different things. Range of motion, reduce it, increase it. These are variables, by the way. Like, look, sometimes we'll keep the load and go like, hey, you're going to step on a 2.5 inch plate for your Bulgarian split squat, and we'll get more depth, right? You now have better mobility when increased range of motion. That is going to help you build more muscle. Um, Speed, flow controlled, we can make it more ballistic. Complexity, static, dynamic, right? Planes, sagittal only, multiplanar. So just understanding like that part that, when it comes to training, there's a lot of things that we can kind of progress and regress, right? And these are your tools in a matrix, like in a toolbox of how you do that. These are our main progression models. Single, which is increasing load. I'll show you my favorite one that we use absolutely the most, which is a double progression, increasing reps and load. Triple progression is load, reps, and sets. We do use this sometimes. Volume, range of motion, increasing sets of range of motion. We do that as well, but like we kind of live a lot here, okay? Which you'll see. For compound lifts, you're going up like, so think about it, micro progressions look like maybe 5 pounds, right? 225, 230, 240, 245. 5 pounds is a small increase in a linear progression. By the way, this works, especially on the strength stuff. Like, so if our main lift for a beginner is a trap bar deadlift, it might look something like this, obviously, maybe lower numbers, right? Because adding 5 pounds, you can do that kind of for a while, right? And here's another thing that people ask: is it okay to not repeat a weight? It's okay as long as you're truly hitting your target, reps and reserve because you're getting training stress. If you go about above certain threshold, you're not. You don't have to progress load weekly, but you do have to progress it over time to have a sufficient stimulus. And you guys know, like with general population clients, man, they come in 1 week, they're cooked, they haven't slept, kids, this work, that, the other. You might have to actually go down. That's okay, as long as accumulatively you're going up. And that's, because sometimes people will push to go up even when it's like the form's starting to break down, what we talked about, because it's like we got to progress. And it's like, longer runway. I'll repeat it, longer runway, right? And this is the math of the micro loading part, right? Like if I add, 5 pounds on a deadlift, 500 pounds, it's only 1.25%. On a bench press of 315, it's 2%. If I do it on an accessory lift, like on a 25 pounds, now it's a 25%, right? It's a big increase in load, which is why I love micro plates, right? And that goes, especially to go, we have 1.25 pound plates for barbells. We have 2.5 pound plates for barbells. We have 1.25 pound plates, micro clip-ons for dumbbells, which is why I really think it helps because you go from, 20 pounds to 25 pounds on a dumbbell bench press, you just bump that up by 25%, right? And let's say you're going like, you're doing 8 reps. Now they might drop down to 3, and you're like, whoa, they don't feel good about it, whatever. But we had 125, that might now be a challenging 8 for them. but they can do it. So just big thing on this is like certain things you can micro load bigger lifts like that and be fine, but not smaller lifts because clients will feel unsuccessful. So is microloading a good tool? Yeah, use the right tool for the right job. When something's easy, don't microload. When it's hard, possibly, right? Most appropriate for upper body movements. Again, when you're doing your, especially dumbbell stuff, pressing overhead, dumbbell benches, one arm dumbbell rows, this is where it kind of plays well. How much weight to add per week? 2 to 5% each week. But percentage of what though? So it's more a guideline than a rule. Again, we have open discussions with my team about this, and I'll do examples. Now the other thing too, I think when people get really strong, micro progressions are also great. So I'm in a phase doing a flat dumbbell bench press for 10 reps at 105 pounds. From 105 to 110 is a big jump. Like that's a big jump. But if I went to 106.25, challenged, went to 107.5, struggling with that, but got it, right? Again, when you get really strong, micro progressions are excellent tools again, right? So for beginners, great. For really strong people, and in general, they're great. But just this whole, you got to think about at the beginning, people make more progress. This is actually a really good I'll share. It's kind of a Brad Stolberg from the book, and had him on a podcast, and we talked about this. When you're a beginner in anything, when people say like get 1% better every day, at the beginning, you're going to get better than 1% better every day, right? And the longer you go, it's going to be less than 1% and less. And once you become elite, it's not even about percentages. It's just about curiosity. Like you're just think about the top power lifter, right? Like they pull like 850 at whatever body weight. And then, man, they're just trying to like their foot stance, their shoes, they're just curious about everything to try to get that extra 5 to 10 pounds. Okay, that's how it's going to usually look like with beginners at the beginning. Like, man, you're adding 10 pounds, per week or more on their trap bar deadlift. You're adding this much weight on this thing. And then the stronger they get, it slows down. It's important to actually talk to people about this. I can't tell you how many times at the beginning I didn't. And people are like, man, I only added like fucking 5 pounds in the last 2 weeks. I'm like, dude, you've been adding 10 pounds for like a year, right? Like you went from 200 pounds on a trap bar to like 420, bro. Like, but you have to explain that. And then when they get it, it's like, okay, cool, this makes a lot of sense, right? So I think this is an important factor. But again, a discussion with your team. This is general progression weekly guidelines chart based on target RP for sets of 6 to 20. So a beginner here will be like week one, like 3 to 4 RIR plus 2 to 3% of one RM or 5% of previous week's load, 5 to 10 pounds, right? But notice how the RIR by the weeks goes closer to zero, right? This is a very, very good because trust me, when I get coaches, they're usually starting either way too far away to this or they're way too close to this. So I have to take them through how this looks like for them. They have to feel it. So that's what we're doing in an in-staff, right? Because look, these charts are awesome, but it doesn't take away from your responsibility of being the coach and developer and mentor to get everybody up to speed of what this actually looks and feels like. Okay. And again, this is where I think the greatness of your program or your coaching and your gym really stands out, right? Because if I just give everybody these charts, it's like, okay, how does this look like in real life? Again, we got to do that, right? Uh, More stuff. By the way, if you just go type in Google RP calculator, you can get this. But it's like, just give you can plug in, 1 RM, reps performed. You can see for 100 pounds here, right? 9.5 RPE, 97, 2 reps, 93, 89. Like it tells you the amount of reps that you're going to get. This is an example for 405, like a trap bar deadlift, right? Again, you can see that RPE 10, 1 rep, 405, 2 reps, 384.75. Now, here's the thing, is that going to be completely correct? As you guys know, what the science shows is that women can lift more reps closer to their 1 rep max than men can, right? That's why you'll see sometimes, like, let's say, I'm just gonna say, like, hey, if you have a woman that can trap bar deadlift 405 and a guy that can trap by 405, it's more likely for the guy to be around that 385. The woman might get 395 for a double. Okay. That's what and this is my anecdotal stuff as well. The research shows this, but anecdotally, sometimes they'll smoke a double at 395 and then, get toasted at 405, for example, right? But these RPE calculators are very, very helpful. Use them if you don't, okay? So case study, right? Did dumbbell bench press for two sets of 40, two dumbbells with 40 for 10 reps. Did 7 reps with 2 of 45. This is what I was saying about earlier. Like, what's going on? Well, 5 pounds is 12.5% of 40. And not only is it 12.5% of 40, it's for 10 reps, right? Trying to go for 10. So it's 9.5% of 52.5 pounds, which is the estimated 1RM, right? And as I'm looking at the time, I only have so much time to kind of go into the number stuff. But like, this is, again, estimated 1 rep based on reps. Go to Epley-Wendler. So this is Epley-Wendler chart that will break down these numbers for you, right? Which is, again, very, very useful. I think this is helpful in staff for your team to go over what that looks like. Because believe it or not, most coaches, especially in the beginning phases, if you haven't done a lot of this, you're not good at estimating the weights. Seeing these numbers will help you be much better estimating. Even if you don't, I think it's good to have a calculator handy. By the way, we're probably going to do this, but give it, like, I'm going to make with AI, with Claude, like build a Vigor like weights calculator where I can just go in one of my agents and ask the question and just does it, and my whole team can use it. We haven't done it yet, but I'm more than happy to share it when we do. um, this is my favorite, right? If you look at my programming and our programming at Vigor, it's heavily influenced this, where basically week 1, 2, and 3, we progress it. Week 4, we go heavier and we go back down. And we just keep doing that. It's 4-week programs, right? Dumbbells, isolation exercises, fixed weights is great for that. Even big exercises, to be honestly, right? And so if you look at like the I like ranges, if you look into the Bridge app, you'll see a lot of like ranges, 8 to 12, right? Um, for example, because then you'd use a weight that allows at least 8 reps. You start with a buffer, and then you attempt to add reps, like when possible, to each set to each new workout. Once you achieve 12 reps on each set, you increase the load 2 to 5% and repeat. I call this the 8 12 8, 12 15 12, 6 9 6, right? Like, and you can adjust it. Like this is malleable, obviously, but this, you could do this with somebody for years and it works, right? So imagine to go 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Great. Increase weight 2 to 5%, depending on lift. And we go back to 8 and you keep doing that, right? And if you undulate it, let's say you do that for 2 phases and you undulate it and you go like, okay, now we're going to go from 12 to 15. Same thing. But like, man, you can make incredible progress for so long, so long, right? Now, there's a lot of ways to apply this method. It works well with dumbbells, with chins, with a whole bunch of different stuff, right? But just keep in mind that adding reps means you're getting stronger relatively, right? And that's what I'm saying, okay? So let's say, week 1, 205 pounds, 9, 9, 10, 2, 5, 10, 10, 12, 205. Like, so again, you're not going to just add 1 rep per week. Maybe you add more, right? You go 10, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. Boom, triggers hit, 215, 8, 8, 11, right? Like that's what it would actually look like in the real world, right? With a bigger lift, maybe with trap bar deadlift. And again, I've found this to be incredible for beginners. Incredible. That's why when you look at the templates, that's why they're like that. Okay. That's why they don't have like the work up to 3RM and 531s and stuff like that yet, because this works so well for a couple years. Okay. And you can see adding rep is getting stronger. 205 pounds at 8 reps is 260-pound 1RM estimate, right? 205 at 9 reps is 265 estimated. 260 to 265 is a 5-pound increase. 5-pound increase is 2% increase going from 260 to 265. So your estimated 1 rep max has increased 2%, right? This only means you haven't gone stronger comparing to equal relative RPEs. But isn't this great to be able to show clients that their 1 rep max is getting bigger as they're increasing those loads, right? So problems to solve, like judging reps in reserve. What are the default weights? Starting too easy on day 1 and then making small jumps, or defaulting to repeating the same thing again and again. Too hard on day 1. How often to add load? We kind of touched on that, but those are things that you need to resolve also with your team as you teach them the system, because it's really important, right? Like, this is, again, inside of the Bridge app. This is awesome. You can kind of see how this looks like, right? RIR 2 to 1, 8 to 12 rep range. Obviously, they're plugging in the weight. This is, again, the app is so helpful with everything that we're basically talking about today, because it helps you do it. But the key is to have a progression mindset, right? I've talked about this But like, here's the big thing, right? Too easy is okay with a completely untrained individual, but then after that, we got to start loading them, right? So let me take you through 4 months of beginner and intermediate. We'll see if we have time for intermediate, but I'm going to stop the share and then go back into the share. So this is what my team gets. Hold on, let's see. I just got to find this real quick. There we go. Boom. And we'll go back into the share. So you can see like this is 16 weeks. I actually got one that's even longer, but it's the exact template, right? Where this is what I was talking about, right? This is a beginner, okay? First 4 weeks, box jump, rotational metabolic wall throws, right? So do a lower body and an upper body power exercise. They superset this. By the way, like for this is what we do often. Most people can start with box jumps, but some people can't, right? So what would that look like? We might do a Dynaball rip or slam into the ground, like one of those jam balls that doesn't bounce, because that trains what? Deceleration, right? So we're gonna be fast into deceleration. So just having a regression model of each of these matters, right? But you'll see that the model is a little bit different when it comes to beginners. Then remember when you saw that chart, eight. So first 4 weeks, eight, 2 sets of eight, 3 sets of eight, 3 sets of nine, 3 sets of 10. Right? We go add a set initially. Notice we start with very low volume, only 2 sets of this stuff. TRX row, we got dumbbell RDL push-up variation, static lunge band, pull apart, hollow hold, right? Because we have squat pattern, row pattern, hinge pattern, push pattern. Then we have single leg. Then we have usually weak link training. So, band pull apart, upper back, and core. That's day one. This is a 2-day program. You see an example, right? Then we got KB trap bar deadlift. See the same eights. Single landmine press. So this is kind of like our quasi overhead, right? One arm half kneeling cable row down, hamstring curl variation, rope face pull, plank with reach. So again, weak links, core. And I've talked about this where what do we add as the last three tricep? I'll usually do preference. So for example, let's say a client's like, I really want to work on my glutes. You'll usually see a bunch of glutes here, right? Hey, I want to add, I want to do more arms. I want to get rid of this on my triceps. Boom, we're going to do triceps. That's the preference where the client ends, it's like the power of moments on like, wow, we're doing the thing that they asked for, right? You can see here, skip variation, scoop toss, right? So we got our power work. Month two, now it's 12, right? So we go 8, 12. Same thing, 212, 312, 313, 314. Chest supported row, 212, 312, right? You can kind of see the same thing. A change in exercises somewhat. Right now we go from a push-up to bench press variation, right? Dumbbell reverse lunge, supported plate Y raise, TRX fallouts. Trap bar DL, landmine Viking press, sprinter lunge, one arm dumbbell row. So this is a hinge variation here. Leg extension squat, chest supported dumbbell posterior fly, side plank, right? And month three. So again, this is the template. Now let me pull up. I'm going to pop out of here because I want to show you the intermediate. But let's see. We're going to file, open. There we go. All right, and you'll see that the intermediate is what I call, my athlete for life model. So this is again people that have come to us with a lot of training experience, or they've trained with us for a while. Now you'll see here. Now all of a sudden, we are doing a strength, like what I said in those brackets. So we still got our explosive, like athleticism stuff. Now I contrast these. Intermediate, we do contrast sets all the time, right? But this is a 753 max. Okay, so you can see week 1, 3, 7. By the way, there's percentages associated with this. 60%, 70%, 80%, and then a max, right? Like, so again, 3, 5 max, 3, 3, 3, 5. They do a broad jump with it. Then the dumbbell reverse lunge, a little more strength orientation. You can see the other things are kind of similar. You always have like conditioning there at the end. Month one, month two, we go to 642, right? Month three is 531. You can see this very Wendlerish, right? Like 531. So, and then now we got single leg broad jumps, dumbbell walking lunges. But by the way, my coaches use this. Now, if somebody couldn't do a thing inside a bridge, they'll do the drop down. But again, I'm going to show you guys this, which gets really cool. um, like they know how to change the exercise, right? And they just basically drop it down because we have an exercise model in there, and it takes them like no time to build out these programs, right? So you can steal that stuff. By the way, some of these templates are inside of the Bridge app.
Mhm.
If you go for the free trial, because ideally you want to turn this, which is month one of this, and this is where it's going to get cool, okay, into this. And what we'll do now, I'm going to kind of hand it over to Cooper, and I'm going to show you, we're going to show you how with the new AI, you can literally, so my Google basically doc, imagine just uploading it into Bridge and it populates like this. This is actually what happened. Like he's going to show you in real time. So I'm going to zap out of my share so we can go into his share so you can see
Beautiful.
how this works and how this happens.
Yeah, and so Luca, can you share one of those program like that screenshot of if you just text it to me, I can kind of upload it here, but like the of that like first month there that you had up. The way that I think about this, folks, right, is there's a lot of ways to think about software. There's a lot of ways to think about AI, and I think there's really one way to think about it though that is going to make sure that you are leveraging it to the maximum efficacy. And so when software started coming out, right, even let's even just go all the way back to email, right? When email first came out, it was like, oh, okay, this is going to make sure that we can communicate across the whole world. It's going to be so much easier, so much quicker than like handwriting things. And, really what inevitably ended up happening was like email created a shit ton more work for people to do, right? Same thing is kind of happening with software, right? It was like, okay, this is supposed to make sure that like, companies don't have to hire X amount of employees because the software is just going to do it for them. And that kind of ended up not being true because everybody had to learn the software and how to figure it out and so on and so forth. Then everyone, right, is now in AI, and you've seen probably a lot of the headlines, people like slashing company, like employees and such, and making sure that they, like basically don't have the opportunity to work anymore. And it's like, as we get like into the like ethical, correct use cases of this stuff, you can give any moron an AI, right, access to it, and they will create something moronic. But you give someone like Luca, someone like yourself, who's like, an excellent coach in AI, and it's going to like 10x what you can do as the subject matter expert, right? So it doesn't replace anything. All we're really doing with this, and Luca, I'm pulling this up in the background here, but all we're really doing with the AI is giving you the chance to get to the most critical task that you can possibly have as quickly and efficiently as possible, right? And that is most often going to be getting these programs, these jam sessions, right? This like written out programming, whether you like to do it on a whiteboard, you like to do it in Google Docs, you like to do it on the back of a napkin. The most important thing is that you are able to have return on investment by then being able to deliver that to your clients, your athletes, whoever you might be working with, right? So I'm downloading this here in the background as Luca just sent it to me. We can download as PDF, right? You could do direct spreadsheets. You can do just the Word doc itself. I'm doing PDF right now. And then I'm going to dive into my screen share and we'll start getting after it. Let me click the button here. I think Alex Karp, he's the CEO of a company called Palantir, which is used heavily by the military and such. And I read his book last year, and he said that like AI is effectively going to be the thing that, for people like me and you who are the subject matter experts, this is the thing that, allows us to 10x the high quality work that we do, but will again, like 1x the quality of someone who does not necessarily know what they're doing. So this such as to say that like a bad program, even if you're using an AI tool, still a bad program, but an exceptional program can become like, world class in an instant with this. So let's go ahead and do new program. We'll do import with AI here. Gonna click this and then boom. Are you guys able to see that screen where I'm clicking through here yet?
Yep.
Beautiful. Good. Okay. So now you'll see the 16 weeks beginner program design.pdf there. Again, I could just go in and click import right now. Right. And that would be, I think, a somewhat moronic way to use AI. Context, especially with something as powerful as what we have here, is to me like the more context you can give, the more you can pour your brain in a paragraph, two paragraphs, right, into this thing. I think the better. So, Luka, like, what would you want the AI to like for sure know about you, about what you're doing, and like some more context to this program so that it can deliver it exactly how you want it and you don't have to upload and re-upload 10 different times?
Um, let's see. I would say stick within the progression models that are in the charts
Yep.
and make it simple to adjust the exercises based on the patterns.
Are you talking movement patterns?
Correct.
Okay.
But keeping the framework of the flow always the same. So the warm-ups, where the explosive exercises lay, where the main lifts are, where the supplement lifts are, this will always be the same.
It was warm ups, and then what was the fast switch stuff? What'd you call it though?
I was put it reactive because it's actually labeled.
Yep. Warm ups, reactive, main lift, and resistance.
Yeah, so I'd be like resistance is
Yep.
before main lift. Yeah,
Yep.
I
Then
would
main
say
lift.
yeah, say main lift.
Do you have the is it energy system? What do you call it on the back end?
Put resilience.
Cool. Beautiful. And then let's just kind of see what it spits out here with that context. Um, yeah, so basically what it's doing right now is it's just indexing the file, right? It's going over, it's, kind of scanning it, reading it. And then it's actually actively building, right, those components that we spoke about. So, when you give it a really nice, well laid out spreadsheet or a doc, kind of like what Luca did, it's going to have a much easier time reading that. The most important thing in my mind that you can do with these AI features is be extremely organized and extremely thorough in the context window. And once you do that, it's kind of it's going to give you kind of what you're searching for without having to work with it too much. And then obviously it says there it can take up to 10 minutes to build. So we'll just kind of wait here. I don't know if anybody has any questions that are popping in. Looks like someone asked, does Quick Coach transfer over easily? Is Quick Coach a software? Have you heard of that, Luca?
Yeah, it's John Goodman's. I mean, I think he sold it.
Got it.
I think there's still, I think it's still functioning, but
Got it. So I would imagine that any software, right? You can take screenshots. If you can export the programs, like that's where it's pretty solid. Um, and then looking at Lucas, some people had questions about like sharing the slides or this PDF. Like, are you cool with that? If you want to throw your email, the best one to reach out to in there.
yeah, you know what? Just email me right here.
Oh, shoot that to everyone.
Oh my bad.
You're good.
I realized this. I realized I just sent it to you. Let's see. Everyone. Bam. Boom.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And I'll wait because I'm gonna have to jet in a second, but I want to make sure that this uploads and that uh we
Yeah, totally.
I finish off on one on a note and a thought.
Yeah, and so I guess I'll kind of dive into you mentioned a few of the features, right? Specifically like weight parameters and such. We have a really cool drop down that I'll be able to show you guys here in a second, but leveraging those tables, right? Those charts. It's obviously extremely important. Like if you have athletes that need to be extremely dialed in on what percentage of their one rep max that they're using for that day, awesome. But the reality is like, a lot of things do not survive first contact. So the element of understanding someone's stress, right, allostatic load, and how that's kind of changing week to week, is obviously going to affect like the outcome on the bar itself that day, or whatever variation that you're doing. So we have this parameter called percent difficulty, and basically if you put 100% difficulty, regardless of whether it's 1 rep, 5 reps, 20 reps, that means that the athlete is going to go to failure, right, with that exercise. If you go to 95% difficulty, now that's more of like okay, half a rep to 1 rep in reserve. Going down to 90%, right now we're talking probably more like 1 to 2 reps in reserve, pretty squarely, not close to failure there. And I think that for the for the athlete, it's really good because it starts to learn what they put in over time. So like Luka, you mentioned, obviously, hey, men versus women having, different percent of 1 rep max that they can kind of play with. And, being able to go up to a higher percentage for women, but men can kind of push the 1 rep max higher. It will learn those things for each athlete. And it's something you could prescribe to 20 people, and it will learn them each 20 very differently, even if it's the same program there. So just another kind of powerful feature that should leverage kind of, what you're really talking about with applying this stuff. Pete Urish raised hand. Pete, if you have a question, just go ahead and shoot it in the chat, man. If anybody else has questions too, now while this is kind of loaded in the background, would be a good time to get them answered before Luka's got a jet here.
While you have that loading,
Mm-hmm.
do you mind jumping out of that? I'm gonna just share my last slide because
Yeah,
I'm gonna show something.
100%.
Oh, hold on 1 second. All right, so this comes down to, you know, also like this part for our gym, right? Like, so my business is both online, mostly. When I say mostly offline, like I have brick and mortar business with a bunch of coaches, hundreds of clients, and we're transitioning to this also because I think I've found that it's one of the most pro looks and approaches to when clients get delivered the program. So you can kind of see like on their, on their phone when they get the program, it looks the client experience is excellent. But we're using iPads because you can have four open, right? So like imagine our semi-private training model where a coach can have all four people that they're coaching in that session right up there, plug in their reps, check the box how much they use, the whole shebang, or see it. Because we tend to tell the clients to plug it in, right? But like this is what the coach sees, right? So it's very, very pro. And then I also have a subscription on we're transferring my whole athlete for life transcription over to Bridge as well. So it's like it has so many functions of it. But like I said, if you want to be an elite side of coaching and how you deliver this through software and how you use it, cut down the time, have templates and models that allow you to run a better business. That's why I chose it. That's why, we're continuing to build with Bridge and obviously doing a lot of these because we want to help a lot of coaches get better at the craft while also using the technology that makes their business more effective and efficient and cuts down the time. So I wanted to share that because it's what I really love about it. And like if anybody here's on the fence, I mean, I'd highly encourage you to just try it out. I think that through my link or general, like it's 30 days free, second 30 days 50% off. So you got a ton of time to actually use all this. My athlete for life template is in there, already done. There's a whole Luka library. There's like 700 or 800 exercises all in Vimeo that can be used. And we're going to keep adding resources to that because one of the missions is to help coaches, again, get better results with clients and build a better business.
Beautiful. So it just populated. So let me go ahead and share this back. We seeing that okay? Good. Okay, so effectively, right, you've got exercise library, or excuse me, we've got an exercise library. There's some things that will be in there, some things that won't. So basically, the initial screen that pops up is going to be, hey, these are all the variations that you had in here that we don't have. So if you can create them, you can replace them, you can skip on that altogether. But for now, we're just going to kind of click confirm and create. And then it'll kind of populate that here. So from a perspective of like, you call exercises different things. You may even have your own exercise library. It's really valuable to upload that stuff and kind of get it in there. So now we've got, right, we see 16 weeks. That seems to be pretty spot on, and it's leveraging the exact block titles that we had. So I'm just going to drop things down. Looking through that, looks good to go. Luka, you tell me if there's anything you want me to click into in particular, but it looks like it kind of took that context window, right, and really nailed it from
Yeah,
perspective. And that's because we gave
that's,
it that,
that's pretty damn good. Yeah.
right? And so what I'll do here is go from week view to load progression view. And so now instead of seeing, right, um the week between the Sundays, right? We're going to see every single day one across this 16-week phase, right? And kind of see how it progresses. So, Luka, you tell me if this nailed the progression or not for day one. But effectively, this is what we kind of have going on here. And you'll see it even
Yep.
added all the cues that he wrote, right? The reason it took so long is because Luka has a very thorough process on that sheet, right? But now, effectively, we click a handful of buttons, typed out a little paragraph, and we got what is multiple hours of transcribing this done in about 8 minutes, I think, or less. So
Yeah.
you tell me, Luke, is that accurate to what you had in there?
Yeah. That's on point.
Beautiful. So then going into it, right? This is where I'm kind of talking about that percent difficulty. This is something where it's like, hey, I wanted all of my resistance to blocks to be, somewhere within these bounds, right? And it'll start to learn the athlete. That's like you can get into the details, you can get into the weeds. If we had tempo progressions, that's something we could throw in here. There's just so much power to the tool. And if you wanted to make like edits, right? So if you clone this thing or you want to switch RDL for something else, you can add alternative exercises here, label them as progression, regression. You can get into the weeds of this stuff, but that's kind of what a high powered tool is supposed to do. It's supposed to let you have the maximum amount of creative expression on your end. So yeah, looks like that works solidly. You got any questions, Luka? Anyone else have any questions about kind of that tool and how you can leverage it to get your existing work onto Bridge?
I got time for maybe one or two more questions. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
even joking when I say like I'm looking at the countdown timer of my Uber's 8 minutes out.
Yep.
So
Beautiful.
we really pushed it, but I wanted to, give you guys as much juice as possible.
Oh, yeah.
And just look like there's different aspects of what, to me, I always say like there's coaching and there's the business of coaching, right? Like you want to continue to continuously improve the bucket of coaching, which means the way you communicate, the way you deliver programs, like the experience of it too, which I think that, you want to continue to improve. Like if you've had, and we had folders for a long time, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like this is better, right? But also what the tech can help you do. Like, for example, my team, think about this. And there was a point in time where, the coaches are like, hey, I'm programming for 3 to 4 hours every Sunday. Like we've cut that down to like, I mean, 30 minutes maybe, right? If not less. Okay. But times seven, right? Times seven. So we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours a year cutting down program design, right? Where they can deliver the best stuff, but not have to spend that much time on it, which you can spend on something else, again, just for themselves. And we continue to improve this. Now, of course, there's the I would say the aspect of also being able to continuously develop your coaches so that they're great coaches, and that's a whole nother ball game. But it's like on the business side, being more effective, being more efficient, having a system to be able to deliver a better product, like that's a game changer. And so if you're not doing that, I highly encourage you to do it. Go in there, play around. Again, you got, 30 days and more to basically check this stuff out. And also see what's already in there. We're gonna keep adding stuff. I hope that I have delivered a lot of value from that standpoint. If I'm more than happy. Like when people DM me, it's not a chat bot answering. Like, so if anybody's got any questions, follow up stuff, hey, shoot a DM to me. I'll get back to you. Honestly, probably good if it's in the next hour because I'll be in an Uber going to Dallas Airport. So, but
Beautiful.
But we'll definitely do more of these. I appreciate you guys being on here, which means that you're dedicated to I don't know what we'll do. Maybe we'll email out the PDFs. I'll make a call on that. I couldn't. I'd have to flip flop inside back into my Google Drive right now, and I got a jet. But we'll definitely do more of this in the future.
Yep.
And I would love to hear from you guys what you would like to see more of. Okay. I think that's also great because it's like it leads into what I create for you guys to give you value. And we'll see you in one of the next ones. Love and appreciate you guys.
Beautiful.
Peace out.
Larry, y'all have a good day. See you, Luca. Safe travels.
Thank you. Bye.